Okay, I'm restarting it now.
Okay. Now it's okay. Black screen.
Mm-hmm.
There we are. Okay. So
Okay.
we seem to be live. So I can close this window so we don't get an echo, and I'll start the recorder as well. Just wait 1 moment. Start recording. And the stage is yours.
Okay. One point. Well, I'll check that later. Okay. Good. So, LibX2Go client and X2Go internals 2021 to 2022. Most of the stuff actually relates to 2021 because there hasn't been much activity in 2022 and also not in 2021 for reasons I will probably explain. So that's just the normal outline. I will tell you something about LibX2Go client first, then some sponsored works that we've had on X2Go client, and then about the X2Go internals. Which is basically all machines that we have. Well, not all machines, but some machines. Okay, so for LibX2Go client, we've had number of small bug fixes. I implemented documentation support for once, and also all the content. So every function is properly documented, even though it might only be a private one, so that people can actually work with that and that it's maintainable. I've also switched the versioning to a scheme inspired by the libNL project, and I've also reworked the internal connection and disconnection architecture pretty intensely. But all of this has been mostly internal changes, nothing really user visible aside from the documentation. It's still not ready to do any actual work. It cannot parse any session data. It cannot actually transfer data over the SSH socket. And it's not scheduled to be used as part of a Remina plugin any longer because a Python implementation that was ready much earlier has been chosen for this task. But it can still be useful within X2Go itself for replacing, for instance, libSSH for X2Go client at some point in time, not right now, but in the future, I guess. And I've also had a talk with Yuri about this when we were driving home from Dornbirn. Um, and I figured out that I basically have to rewrite the whole connection architecture again to use a signal-based API if that's even possible. That has been LibX2Go client. Now on to X2Go client. There have been 2 feature requests. The first one was pretty easy to do because it just related to escape, not actually going back to the main menu after a session finished. Which meant that you couldn't easily select a new session to start, something like that. And the next one was that if a session was running, the resume button was just grayed out and users didn't know what to do. So for the first issue, I just implemented a generic shortcut, which should be working for all Qt versions down to 4, up to 5.5, actually probably even 6. So that was really, really easy to do. For the second thing, I've looked at whether there's already a session running with the parameters that have been specified while connecting. And if that was true, I basically started to show a message to the user that he should first suspend the session and then resume it, because this functionality was always within X2Go client. It just wasn't visible that you can do that. And as a third thing, I've also increased the session list height and the session list height for both normal and mini modes, because the additional text would have been cut off by the original height. And as an added bonus, I also added a shortcut to the session list view so that you can actually escape out of that as well. That wasn't working at all previously. Okay, now that's the wrong title, but anyway, okay. This is actually X2Go internals and not X2Go client. For X2Go internals, the one good news is that PPC64 Big Endian is end of life. IBM pulled the plug on it, and that means that we also don't really have to support it any longer. I do plan on supporting it if there's commercial need for that. But well, for that, people would have to essentially pay, because we'd have to re-engineer the whole building architecture to work on CentOS 7, because this is basically the only distribution that still supports PPC64 Big Endian. Debian never had PPC64 Big Endian support. They only supported PPC 32-bit Big Endian up until Debian Jessie, which by now is like 4 times old stable. So not actually a good choice for anything. And PPC64, PowerPC was also never part of the Debian LTS project, which means that, once the distribution itself received no more updates, that's been about it. Okay, I've deactivated all packages on Jenkins, and I will probably move them to the package archive at some point in time. I haven't done this yet. Okay, now both package builders and the wiki, which are on the same machine actually, are still based on Debian Stretch. This is old stable by now. It's getting more and more difficult to maintain because things break, because new distribution versions are being released, and they need specific features within package stacks such as RPM and DNF. I've had like multiple failures because of RPM not providing new tags for internal data actually, but those tags have actually been used by, for instance, OpenSUSE to filter stuff or something like that. I've also updated the Doku wiki that we've been using from PHP 5 to PHP 7, but I've had to apply a lot of patches for it to actually still work, which was a bit weird, but I guess that PHP 7 is also outdated by now. We already have PHP 8, and maybe the PHP 7 version that was within Stretch is also too old to be fully supported. So that might explain that, or maybe because the plugins we use are not really up to date. I'm not quite sure of that. Anyway, we have to upgrade anyway at some point in time, because LTS support has been running out already in July 2021. And we've even started to see TLS issues on JEPSAND because of the outdated CA certificate chain that is installed with the base operating system. Well, that's the main reason why I haven't built packages for newer distros, because I'd have to actually implement it in both the packages that I will explain later on, and due to timing constraints. Now, the easiest solution would be to just upgrade to Debian Bullseye, but that isn't working as easy as it sounds because we've modified a lot of packages for them to work for our use case. So everything that I've written there is true, but I'd like to expand on that. So basically, we're using one system to build all packages minus the Ubuntu packages which are being built on Launchpad, and which we don't really have any control over, which can be quite bad for some packages. Well, a few OpenSUSE packages which are being built on build.opensuse.org, but those are not regularly maintained by me. Everything else is built on one machine with one operating system, and the build tools that do that, well, basically create change routes in order to drop out, well, source packages and binary packages. For Fedora or CentOS, Red Hat-based distributions, the program that does that is mock. For OpenSUSE or SUSE-based distributions, this package would be OBS build, for instance. And for Debian, it would be sbuild, which is pretty much the standard building change root program for this kind of stuff. And that works, and all of them work pretty much in the same way, just for their respective base architecture and package type, of course. Now, mock is especially difficult because mock has been using, mock is only essentially a huge Python script or a collection of Python scripts that creates a change route, then goes into it, takes a build directory, creates an source RPM out of that, and that source RPM can then be fed back into mock in order to build binary packages. So it also needs for building the base change route, because it's not just getting like a tar gz file which can then be extracted. It needs a package manager on the host system, and the basic package manager is RPM, and its front end would be, well, either Yum or DNF nowadays. Yum was the old package manager. DNF is a new package manager since Fedora 22, I think. And Yum is to Debian what apt is to dpkg. Yeah, and initially within Debian, up until Debian Stretch, Debian had mock, Debian had Yum, and Debian had RPM. But all of them were, well, most of them were Python 2 based. I think that RPM already had Python 3 support. And at some point in time, with Debian Buster, I think, well, it was already clear that Python 2 would be end of life very soon. So all packages that only supported Python 2 had to be dropped from Debian. And this included Yum, and by extension also mock, even though mock would have been perfectly happy using Python 3 if only it would have been upgraded, but without the package manager on the main system, which is Yum, it did make sense to actually keep mock. So it basically was thrown out of Debian. And the next thing is that Yum, the package manager, has been replaced by DNF, another package manager, which has been written from, well, essentially from scratch, and always supported Python 3 and Python 2. Red Hat wanted to switch to that, so they essentially completely dropped Yum and never maintained it further. Never actually used it any further. it also supported more features than Yum, and less features than Yum to some degree, give or take, based on who you ask. So I started to actually port the DNF stack to Debian in, I think, 2019. And after like half a year, I've been done. I managed to do that, and I've wrote an ITP to the Debian mailing list, intent to package to the Debian mailing list for inclusion within Debian. And then for about, I guess, a year or so, there was no activity. But then the good folks at Cubes OS came into play and actually started to maintain DNF. They picked it up and started to maintain it because they have been using it internally for some reason in their OS. So I'm not saying that we are switching to Cubes OS. I'm just pointing out that those people are actually maintaining DNF within Debian. So Bullseye actually includes DNF. It doesn't include mock yet, but I've got a private message from the maintainer that he actually intends to put mock back into Debian. And that was only like 2 weeks ago. So everything's pretty new on that. Once it's unstable, I can more or less easily backport it to Debian stable. That is, for instance, Bullseye or Bookworm, whatever, will be out when we actually do the upgrade. Now, the very newest news is that Yuri actually has been also started working on it and has upgraded mock to the newest version in Debian packaging, including its dependencies. So that might actually work out at some point in time, but we still need to do other things to patch mock in a way so that it actually works, because RPM is broken on Debian for reasons that I don't even want to tell. Now the next thing on the table is the Windows Builder. We are still using a Windows 7 VM that's hugely outdated. It's not actually reachable from the outside, so security concerns from outside are not that big of a deal. But we still should upgrade to like Windows 10 or Windows 11 rather sooner than later. Now I want to do this without a lot of disturbance to the build infrastructure, but it's probably going to take at least weeks until this is done, if not, a month or two. Because there's a lot of craft on there. We have like 3 different build systems on this machine, and I have to, well, basically redo everything and switch to a newer version of, I guess it'll be MSys2, because that's what people use nowadays. But yeah, do away with all these different build systems and old packages that linger around everywhere, and maybe that clears up a few things. Also, just in case I thought about it right now, Windows does include OpenSSH, or the OpenSSH server and client on Windows natively with Windows 10. That doesn't mean that we could use it as part of X2Go, because it doesn't support features that we'd actually need, like Unix sockets. And I think that's not the only feature that they haven't implemented. Yeah, and because there's so much work to do, I basically never want to even get started on it, so I drag it out, which only makes it worse. So to conclude, I personally wish for funding, because time is money, and this especially an issue on the Windows and macOS side of things, where I don't even have hardware for macOS any longer, really, because my I have a 2009 MacBook Pro, which has been more or less dead for a few years now. Then I bought a 2012 MacBook Pro, which can also not be upgraded past OS 10 10.12, and we are all already at OS 10.13, I guess. So like 3 versions after that. Yeah. So any commercial funding would be highly appreciated for this sort of thing. That's basically, and we'll get it. We'll get it done anyway at some point in time, especially given that Yuri stepped in and tried to do something about the mock situation, which will make things better on the Debian side. But funding is still very, very highly appreciated. Okay, that's essentially been it. If you have any.
Thank you, Mihai.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm.
And so the final question remains, what's your spread?
I don't use any specific spread. I use a lot of spreads, but nothing specific.
In that case, you will be assigned one. Please stop your screen sharing.
Mm-hmm. Stop my screen sharing. Okay.
So now your spread of the day is hazelnut spread.
Uh-huh. Hazelnut.
Okay, so any questions? Did Vadim listen in? Or is he away from keyboard? Yuri, any questions from you? If not, then I would
Mihai,
stop the recording.
did you have possibilities to test my mock walk?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
I'm still. I've started patching it yesterday, but never finished, and I didn't have time for doing anything. Yeah. And
what
testing
exactly are you patching? What exactly is the problem? What exactly
the problem
doesn't work?
is RPM being broken within Debian, so we have to work around that. We need to make sure that, for instance, the RPMDB is not touched if you just list packages or try to install. Well, no, installing dependencies would actually mean that you have to touch it. But installing the sRPM, for instance, doesn't require touching the RPMDB. Listing packages doesn't require touching it. Well, basically, mock creates a change root, right? Right. So when it is first launched, and then it caches this change root. Now, what you don't see is that mock actually goes through a cleanup stage every single time the change root is created, so that files within the home directory are also nuked, temporary files. And because RPM puts the RPMDB in the home directory, Debian puts the RPMDB into the home directory, that also gets nuked, which is bad if you want to install additional software after the initial change root creation, because then the outside package manager, DNF, wouldn't know which packages are already installed and which dependencies, such as reverse dependencies, really. RPM has something quite similar to reverse dependencies. You can say if package X is installed on the system, then also depend on package Y. And that wouldn't work if you just nuke the RPMDB. So those are all things that I have to patch against in mock for it to even work correctly in Debian.
Just wait. If I am correct, then after creating a change root, RPM is saving their RPMDB in this change root.
No, yes, but I mean, it depends on what package manager you use. If you are using the well, and this is actually another problem, because if you mock has two different modes of operation.
I mean DNF mode.
DNF? DNF? No. Mock has two ways of working with that. It can either create a minimal system to start with, and then use this minimal system to download to install more packages. This is called bootstrapping mode. But we didn't have that in mock 1.3.22 or whatever we've been using. This has been new in some newer mock version, and this could actually work fine for us. But that also means that once you have the initial change root with the minimal set of packages that mock creates, we'd still have two different RPM DBs on the system. One is
outside and one is
not outside. No. It's in the home directory of the root user, because that's where things are being placed if you say install root. And the other one would be in volib RPM, both within the change root. And that can be problematic.
Problematic, maybe, yes, but I don't really see the real problem. What exactly doesn't work? Maybe you can make a bug report on Debian or something like that.
I've already did so in the RPMDB and HomeDir bug reports that we have, where I explained essentially what is happening within the within mock that makes it break, and how this can be fixed. But again, this has been for the older mock version, which didn't have the bootstrapping feature. I've never actually tested the bootstrapping feature. I don't know how that would work. But if the minimal system that is being installed still, I mean, if all these packages are lacking from the RPMDB when mock goes to switches to the internal DNF binary, then that would still be bad, because it wouldn't know some of the packages that have already been installed in the change root, and that would lead to, well, trouble when you try to when they are being pulled in as dependencies, for instance, because you just get file conflicts and stuff like that.
Okay, I have found your bug report. Okay, thank you.
Well, it's not my bug report. It's a bug report written by someone else, but I commented on it.
Yes, I have seen it.
But again, this has been an old problem back in the days when bootstrapping mode was not supported within mock. Bootstrapping mode also can be disabled still, but it's on by default now. So maybe with bootstrapping mode it works better, but I believe that this won't be the case, even with bootstrapping mode, because of the two different RPMDB things. Now with the bootstrapping mode, we'd basically be able to get rid of at least all patches that, of at least that patch that tries to keep the RPMDB pristine, because the problem with that has been, also back in the day, that if the outside DNF version was lower than the inside DNF version, and RPM actually tried to has been used to do any operation on it, which then upgraded the RPMDB, then the outside version couldn't install any packages any longer, because you can't install packages because it can't read the database package format any longer, database format any longer.
I understand all the problems, but really, after we have created a change route,
Yeah,
why we should use Debian LPM?
Well, that's been the way that Mock has been working before. After the new way is to use a bootstrapping mode, which is then uses the internal DNF version, the internal DNF and RPM versions. So that would be fine.
Okay, I understand.
But again, the internal DNF version would know about the packages that have already been installed with the outside DNF version while creating the minimal change route first. And that can lead to very weird issues because it doesn't know what packages have been installed, so rich dependencies don't work correctly. And if it actually tries to install a package that has already been installed, it'll just get a file conflict and abort the build, for instance, which is why you have to be very, very careful with doing that. And which is probably why I will have to patch even more, because I'd have to make sure that the RPMDB within the home directory is synced or put also into /var/lib/rpm.
Just for your information, I have heard about mock for first time from you. Yes. The last years I have always used Rinse from Thomas Lange for bootstrapping RPM-based systems. Just for information.
Yeah, okay, but these are not package building software. This is not package building software.
Yes, it's just for bootstrapping.
Yeah, so mock is actually pretty complicated, and mock is not the only package that we have to modify in order for it to work, because even libsolve, which is part of OpenSUSE and its zip project, suffers from essentially the same symptoms, although not quite as extensively as DNF and Red Hat based systems. Even those I had to patch.
Thank you for your great work.
Well, my general plan is to actually drop this patch from RPM, which would make everything much easier. And well, it's just one line within one specific file that we have to remove on Japsend in order to drop all these packages, but we cannot get this upstream if it's broken in the default mode that we ship it with in Debian.
Yes, I see.
Okay, guys, it's getting quite late once more, and so I'd say we stop the recording. We are done with the talk. Mihai, I have two tasks for you. Since you said you need funding for this, I would like to point out that we have a funding platform, Better Place, and on Better Place it is possible to define particular
Goals.
needs. Need not only one goal, but needs. And this looks like this.
Wait, I'm not at the PC right now. Okay, what is needed too? Okay, yeah.
So you could specify for each need that you have, how much money you would need, and a short description of what that particular need is, and we could put it on Better Place. So please sum it up, turn it into small pieces that can be assigned as single needs, and we can put it on Better Place and hope for some donors. That's the one thing. The other is that we really need to get stuff released this week. So since you came online that late today,
Yeah, we won't be
I don't
able
know
to.
if it's a good idea if you should just start working on it now, or if that will mess with your sleep cycle even further.
I've only slept for like 7 hours the past 36 hours, so I'm not actually prepared to do any of that.
Okay, so just please try to be there tomorrow, so we can, so you can work on it tomorrow after the talk. We'll probably need you tomorrow as well, in case there are any questions from people who are going to watch the recording. And on Thursday, we'll have Alex talk regarding HTML5 client and K-Drive. And it would be really cool if we could already be release ready by then. So Alex can chime in and discuss further funding needs with us, because he has some open points or missing features in K-Drive, in HTML5 client that we could turn into needs as well. And it would be cool if we could discuss that together on Thursday after his talk, and not spend the time still working on the release. I mean, if it's so complicated that it just has to happen on Wednesday and Thursday, then be it. But it would be really cool.
I don't know.
I mean, be release ready on Wednesday evening.
I mean, okay, I can tell you one thing. X2Go HTML looks pretty much release ready. I mean, the last build was 7 months ago, or even 1 year ago. But all these builds so far has been successful, so I wouldn't see why we couldn't release it. It will only be released on Debian for now. We don't have RPM packages for that at all.
Okay.
And K-Drive is more complicated, also in X. I've seen a lot of package building failures.
Yeah, please take a look at this tomorrow.
Yeah, but some of those.
If we can get it release ready tomorrow, that's great. If you can't get it release ready, then please explain what still needs to be done. Well, maybe Alex or Mike. Well, Mike's going on vacation soon, but maybe someone can help you get this running.
Well, I believe that some of these failures are just things that can easily be fixed. Others are more difficult, but are not actually really relevant any longer. We have to drop support for Stretch and Buster anyway, probably. So, or at least Stretch.
Yeah.
So everything else is,
Okay, so this is it for today. Have a good evening, everyone, and hopefully see you tomorrow by 2000.
Okay, so I'm also stopping the recording now.